We open people up with rhythm. We deliver message with word.
You change how they feel.
And we change how they act. I want to use my music to create anthems that become mantras for togetherness. Who's actually looking at stopping the disease from infecting folks rather than just boosting your immune system? I was just trying to solve a problem and find the people who knew how to actually engineer that problem solved.
So Aloe Blacc, thanks for being with us today for our conversation. I've been looking forward to this. We had occasion to meet a few weeks ago when you attended a Techonomy conference that Worth Media Group put on, and I was blown away by you. I've told all the people on my team, I said, geez, you go to these events, you want to meet one or two new people and have an opportunity to build a new relationship. You don't try and meet 50 people. It's just not practical. But meeting you was a real treat because you're just a special guy. And not only are you talented, but your range of interest just blew me away. So I'd love to get to know you better and have our community get to know you better. So take us back to the beginning. You're born a small child. Where?
Yeah, I was born in Southern California, an hour south of Los Angeles in a small town called Laguna Hills, about a
nice area,
20 minutes from the beach. And thank you. It was great to have this experience of like a small town growing up. My parents are from Panama. They're immigrants. They came in the late 70s. My dad joined the military right away. And
Marine
my parents,
Corps?
in the Marine Corps. And my parents decided that they would just settle in one place. My dad would go off and do his tours. So we were, my sisters and I were lucky enough to have a kind of consistency and stability and not be what they called military brat, traipsing across the world.
But that had to be a real deliberate decision.
It was a deliberate decision, but it was also, it was a tough decision to make. My
Sure.
dad was
You'd be gone
away
for a
from
while.
us all the
Yeah.
time. And my mom was basically a single mother for those times.
Was it a military community? Was there a support system?
It was not. It was not a military community. And we were certainly the only Panamanian immigrants in the neighborhood. And at school, my sisters and I were one of, maybe 5 other Black families in the school that we went to. And so we were different enough. But what was really interesting is that it was, maybe a special and golden and magical time. We had, at least I speak for myself, I had the greatest experience and the very best friends, people that I am in communication with to this day. And it was awesome because my parents chose a neighborhood with great schools. And those schools prepared my sisters and I for further education. And I was lucky enough to get a full tuition scholarship to USC in Southern California.
It's like winning the lottery.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. On both counts, kind of place you grew up, family, and then education opportunity.
My dad was adamant. He was the kind of person who really believed deeply in education. When in Panama, he had already been a teacher, a fireman, a plumber, carpenter, an electrician, you name it, he did it.
So when he migrated here, how old was he when he went into the Marine Corps?
He was in his mid-20s.
That's unusual.
And he really wanted to go into the Air Force.
Uh-huh.
His older brother was a pilot. And he went and started taking these tests that the military offer to kind of place your aptitude.
Yeah.
And he was primed for it, but the Marine Corps got wind of his test scores. And they convinced him to join the Marine Corps. And they said, you'll get a chance to work with airplanes for sure.
Yeah.
He did, but not in the capacity as a pilot. He worked on cargo and logistics and supply.
How many years did he do in the Marine Corps?
He did 30 years of service in the Marine Corps.
So he didn't get out till his mid-50s.
It must have, yeah, it must have been. I never thought about how old he was when he left. But yes, it was his mid-50s. Yeah, he was a special deal in the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
When he got out, they kept asking him to come back because of his innate ability to just solve problems that had lasted for decades that no one else was solving.
Did he
And
stay in the enlisted ranks? Did he transition to the officer ranks?
he started as an enlisted and he transitioned into officer, and he became what they call a Mustang when you surpass commissioned officer, non-commissioned officer, and get into commissioned officers. And he retired as a major
Wow.
in the Marine Corps.
Ergo, the name of one of your companies.
Ergo, yeah. Yeah. Recently I started a company called Major Inc. after my dad, because I was thinking, we want to solve big problems. And my dad, that's what he did, constantly solving big problems. Found this amazing technology out of the University of Houston for drug discovery and development.
And that was a result of you being frustrated by doing all the right things, getting inoculated for COVID.
I did all the right
booster
things.
shot. And how was your COVID experience?
I got COVID. I was boosted, and I still succumbed to the disease. And I thought to myself, who is working on prophylaxis? Who's actually looking at stopping the disease from infecting folks rather than just boosting your immune system? And I had an idea about the mechanism of action. I was reading all the scientific papers and all the new technologies that were coming out. And I thought,
this goes back to an earlier interest of yours. I mean, as a kid, you thought you were going to be a scientist.
Yeah, I'm always been very curious. And I went to USC. I studied.
That comes up so often, that curiosity.
Yeah.
It's so important. I just had the conversation with my sons recently about, I don't know if it's learned, but curiosity seems to be in the background of so many people like you have been successful.
Curiosity is huge. If not curious about how the world works and how to make things, you're basically just like a passive a recipient of whatever circumstances come upon you. And I like to tinker.
You want to influence where things go.
I want to be able to make things.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning before, I love process.
Yeah, we were chatting about whether it's a scientific process or the creative process in music. It's a process.
I love process. And so studying the mechanism of this disease, I was like, there's probably a way to block the disease from entering our cells. And I figured out that, the ACE2 receptor is how the spike protein insults the cell and gains entry. Why don't we just block that mechanism? Why don't we block the ACE2 receptor? And I found this scientist, Dr. Gomika Udugama-Soria.
Well, you get an A+ for that.
Right?
Just saying the name.
But the thing is, he's probably a national treasure of Sri Lanka. He's there right now working with the president of Sri Lanka to develop their science and technology solution, something similar to the NIH. How are they going to advance
Public
the country
health
in terms of research?
Yep.
Yeah. And so when I found his paper, I sent an email right away and said, look, you probably don't
found his paper. What do you mean you found his paper?
Okay, so in doing my research, I was studying as much as I could about SARS-CoV-2. And I looked up, how do you block the ACE2 receptor? That was my Google search, block ACE2. And I found a bunch of papers that said things about like ACE2 decoys. This is where they, synthetically create molecules that mimic, it's biomimicry, mimic the ACE2 receptor. And if you inject and saturate your system with these, the SARS-CoV-2 virus has to determine a place to anchor,
to attach.
And now there's competition. There's the decoys, the fake ones, and the real ones. And so you're probably still going to get infected.
You limit the opportunity.
Yeah. You're creating it's a competitive agonist. You're creating
improving your odds.
A competitive antagonist. You're creating an opportunity to reduce your viral load. But this disease is so virulent that maybe that's not going to work. I thought our best bet is to just block. And so when I found his paper, it's because I wrote block ACE2, and his paper said molecular mask blocking SARS-CoV-2 from attaching to the ACE2 receptor. I read the paper and I thought, this is the mechanism I'm looking for.
But you'd been in biotech before that.
No, this is my first. This is my first attempt at being in biotech. I'm not even trying to be in biotech. I was just trying to solve a problem and find the people who knew how to actually engineer that problem solve.
So you're at USC. What'd you study there?
I studied communication at the Annenberg School.
Yep.
And I also studied linguistics and psychology. I was trying to piece together a neuroscience major. I was more interested in the psychological aspects of neuroscience rather than the biophysiological aspects. But I ended up spending a summer in a wet lab working on location of motor memory in the cerebellum, the inner positive nucleus.
A 4-credit experience or just interest?
It was kind of
you wanted a job and might as well be in an area you're researching?
I applied for a research program, and they said, well, what do you want to study? And I said, I'd love to work with a neuroscientist. Mm-hmm. So they put me in a lab with Dr. Thompson, and his big discovery was what he believed was the location of motor memory. Where in the brain does it reside? Where in the brain does a reflex get localized in terms of memory? And I helped for a summer try to do some research to keep, you have to duplicate studies to make sure that what you did the first time can happen again. And I was part of one of those replication studies, working to try to prove that he was right.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned how to read papers, write papers, and do research in a lab. But it wasn't my forte, not at all. Like I was more rhetorical communication theory scholar and a language production development comprehension scholar than a wet lab neuroscientist.
And that was, did you think that would be a good career, or was it just a pure interest?
It was purely, for me, it was purely enrichment. And I was happy to do it for the time. I knew that there was a horizon and that I wouldn't. And once I had spent that summer in the lab, I was like, this is not really for me.
Really?
I don't want to be in the lab all day.
White coat, yeah.
No, it's not for me.
What was your overall college experience?
My overall college experience was, oh man, I had a great time.
Did you?
I loved working with organizations that offered, events and activity on campus. I did a lot of that. Worked with the
Did you live on campus?
The program board. I lived on campus. My roommate was Brandon Paradise. He's a fantastic law professor at Rutgers now. Mm-hmm. And we had really, really insightful, deep conversations for the 3 years that we lived together. Mm-hmm. And we're still really, really close. I consider us best friends now.
That's great.
Worked with the program board, creating events, concerts, and activities for students on campus. And
if you wanted to get home, it would be an hour and a half away.
You know what? Since I lived on campus, I didn't have far to go, but to go to my parents' house, it was just an hour.
Yeah.
On the weekends. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I graduated, I lived really close by. And I was lucky enough that when I was in school, I joined an internship program with Ernst & Young. Mm-hmm. And so I had this every summer opportunity to be a business consultant. And when I graduated, they offered me a job. So I had a chance to walk into corporate America. And so that's where I knew that the lab wasn't for me. I had this concept of an employer when I graduated, and it made all the difference. Like having that USC experience, the internship with Ernst & Young, it gave me some business acumen and some endurance to live that life as a consultant.
You did that for a few years. And the little I know about your journey has been that it seems to me, looking at the different things you've done, that you're very good at turning lemons into lemonade.
Yes.
So you got COVID. You say, what can I do about this?
Yeah. How can I fix this?
And you get laid off at EY.
Yeah.
And you say, I'm not just going to sit here and feel sorry for myself. I'm going to do what?
Well, I worked for EY for two solid years, 4 summers as an intern, 2 solid years as a full-time employee. And then I got laid off due to a reduction of force. And rather than going right into getting another consulting gig, which would have been pretty easy, headhunters are always looking, I decided that I'd follow my passion for a little bit and just do music.
Now, had you been doing music?
Since I was 15.
Yeah.
I was recording and releasing music on cassettes and vinyl and eventually CDs. And I had a following, a small following, but there was something there that made me believe that there's an opportunity for me to do this for a little bit before I have to, put my hat back on and go back into...
Aloe, you tell a cute story about your mom being concerned when you said you weren't going to stay in consulting.
Oh my goodness.
Take a little leave.
It was a few years after I'd been laid off. So I'm thinking, how many years is this? Probably 3 or 4 years. And she was really, really concerned. Like, when are you going to go get another job?
Grow up.
And music is not a career.
Yeah.
Immigrant parents, they want you to be a doctor, a lawyer.
Work.
Right. It's always, you make sure you can put food on the table. And I was this close. I was this close to going back to get another job. I was thinking about it, but so many positive opportunities happened that music kept raising its hand as a real bona fide way for me to make a living.
So you're doing local gigs?
I was doing local gigs, but I was getting requests from all over the world to either feature and guest appear on other people's music or to go do concerts in other parts of the world. And
are you attached to a label at this time?
No, I was completely independent.
Yeah.
Completely independent.
Social media was
there was no social media. This is
percolating there. This is, you got things like walled gardens like Yahoo and
okay,
AOL.
So there were this is I'm saying 2002 is when I
2002, because I know you
2003 is when I got laid off.
Yeah.
2004, 2005.
Yeah, that was pre-social media.
Pre-social media, pre-iPhone. And I ended up going on a tour in Europe with this group of hip hop artists, and I paid my own way, basically. But it was my opportunity to showcase my talent in Europe. When I came home,
practice your craft.
Practice my craft and just hopefully build a new audience.
Yeah.
Extend my audience. And one of the artists gave me a bunch of instrumentals to write rap songs to. And I wrote a whole album of rap songs.
And that's your strength, is lyrics?
It was hip hop and lyrics, yes. Yeah. That's my strength.
Back to the linguistics.
It paid off.
In school, yeah.
It paid off.
And are you a mathematical lyricist? You think about, you like process. Do you like structure? Do you retreat to structures that you're comfortable with?
I can vacillate between both.
Yeah.
Stream of consciousness and very structured methodology of songwriting, and especially in hip hop. So it depends on what kind of song I'm writing and what's the intention.
But your style crosses hip hop, R&B, country.
Well, now it is. But back then it was just purely hip hop. And I recorded 15 hip hop songs to these beats, and one on the 16th track, I was like, I don't know what else to write. I'm just going to try something weird and sing Sam Cooke's Change Is Gonna Come over this hip hop beat. He turned it into his record label, and they loved the song that I was singing on. And they said, we want to sign you. And they signed me as a vocalist instead of a hip hop artist. I was like, you sure? Like, I'm a rapper.
Yeah.
I really want to rap. And they signed me as a vocalist. And I was like, I've got to learn to sing now. And that began my career as a singer.
Yeah.
And so when my mom was like, are you going to get another job? I said, I'm just going to try this music thing for a little bit longer. I'm thinking about it. I might, but just for a little bit longer. And it just kept raising its hand until, bang, I had a hit.
And what was that first hit?
First hit was a song called "I Need a Dollar."
Mm-hmm.
It was a song that ended up being, a theme used in a TV show called "How to Make It in America," which did not make it in America. So the show only had a season and a half, but it became really popular with youth outside of the U.S. They were streaming it illegally using torrents in Europe, and radio stations started playing my song. And completely kind of indie artist. And
how do you hear about that?
Well, the record label that signed me as a vocalist got wind that there was a radio station playing my music, and that there was interest in me coming out to do concerts. And so I started going back to Europe. I had already opened up the doors with the hip hop, and now they were opening their arms.
And you developed some relationships you could tap into?
And they came, they certainly welcomed me back as a vocalist.
Okay. During this time, how are things financially for you?
Well, I wrote "I Need a Dollar" during that time when I got laid off. And
so it was a little
financially, there was some stress. There was a bit of financial stress. I had a little bit of a cushion from being laid off.
Yeah.
But it wasn't going to last forever. And this music situation wasn't a sure bet, and that's why my mom was a bit worried.
When did she stop worrying?
She stopped worrying. She stopped worrying when it was apparent that I was not in dire financial straits at all, and I bought her a house. And
I love that when you told that story.
And I said,
stopped
"Mom,"
worrying when you handed her the keys to the house.
She stopped worrying when I bought her the house. And I said, you remember when you used to tell me that I should get another job?
Sorry, I didn't pay attention.
Yeah, Mom. I didn't listen to your advice, but things transformed in such a magical way.
So your interests are many. You have much of an interest in sports?
Nah, not much of an interest in sports. I enjoy watching a game here or there.
Yeah,
but I haven't really engaged.
You went to a school that's got a storied sports program.
Yeah, the football.
Were you
program
interested
is
in
huge.
football while you were there?
I think I went to one game.
Is that it?
While I was there.
Yeah.
Now, the relationship I have with the team at this point is that I recorded a song that the band and students have used year after year after year in rallies. And
that's pretty cool.
And so it ended up being, kind of my legacy for sports at the school, which.
Now you have kids now. Do they have an interest in sports? Do you drag them to see the Trojans?
My kids aren't really that interested in sports. We'll watch the Super Bowl when we visit family. If the basketball game's on, they'll watch.
Yeah.
They are right now participating in a sport called capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial art.
Oh.
It encompasses music, dance, song, instrumentation. They have to learn how to write songs and play instruments and also do the martial art. And it's very physical.
Wow.
So they're enjoying that. My daughter's.
How did they get interested in that?
Well, my wife had been a capoeirista back when she was in her early 20s.
Is she from Brazil?
She's not from Brazil, but my wife can do everything you could imagine when it comes to dance and physical physical fitness. And she was into capoeira. I think she's also a hip hop artist.
Oh yeah.
So as a B girl, which is what the term we use for breakdancers, as a breakdancer, one of her friends was like, "You should also do capoeira. You can move really well."
Yeah.
So she got involved, and when she recognized that there was a capoeira studio near our house, got the kids involved.
And where did she grow up?
She grew up in Australia. Now she's half Turkish, half Mexican, born in Mexico, raised in Australia.
Well, that's exotic.
Oh my goodness.
That's called a global citizen.
And now she lives in the US with me. I imported.
Where did you guys meet?
We met in Australia. I went to Melbourne for a music conference. And this is after my first solo album, The Change Is Gonna Come, a hip hop mashup that I did. she was the voice of hip hop on radio and the face of hip hop on TV. She was the host, basically expanding everybody's knowledge on what's happening globally with hip hop
so you go
music.
on tour there, you do her show, and
We met and we became friends and didn't know what was going to become of it. I was trying to be extremely professional. I didn't want to ruin.
well, there's a change for you, huh?
I didn't want to ruin my opportunity to keep having music played on the national platforms. And she was the gatekeeper. And so she ended up coming to the US during Grammys week in Los Angeles to interview all of the major stars. And her producer said, find a couple of indie artists to interview just in case one of the major stars fall through.
Yep.
And she gave me a call and was like, do you want another interview? I was like, of course. And so it happened to fall on the same week of Valentine's Day. And I said, hey, by the way, what are you doing on Wednesday? And she looked at the calendar and she was like, it's Valentine's Day. She was like, he probably doesn't have a girlfriend.
He doesn't know.
I took her out
he's
to
certainly not a florist.
I'm certainly not a florist. I took her out to a concert and that began our relationship.
Well, I have a very storied career in show business.
Tell me.
I've been in one movie, and it was called Valentine's Day.
When was this? What?
This is probably 8 or 10 years ago.
I was about to say within the last decade because I remember this film coming out.
Justin Kutcher.
Yeah, it was all-star lineup, right?
Ensemble, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was Gary Marshall, and he was quite a character. And he called me one day at the office, and my assistant, this is before cell phones were as ubiquitous as they are, and I'm on the other side of the office, and my assistant calls, there's a Gary Marshall on the phone for me. I said, Gary Marshall, very much. She goes, the TV movie guy. So I'm walking back to my office wondering which of my friends is pulling my leg here. And I get on the phone, and he's got that distinct Bronx accent, and he says to me, Jimmy, I'm doing this movie called Valentine's Day. It's set in a flower shop, and I just thought it'd be hysterical if you were in the scene. Well, he convinced me he wasn't pulling my leg, and it was such a hoot. I went out there for 3 days. I shot in Burbank on a street where they converted a building into this Sienna flower shop, the Sienna Cafe / flower shop. And all these stars were there, Dr. McDreamy and Ashton Kutcher and all these stars. And so the best part of it, though, was Gary loved to do these ensemble movies because he hired all his friends and relatives. And he'd have these dinners each night at a restaurant. He'd get a big round table, and he'd have 12 or 14 people around the table and just have a wonderful time. So I was out there for 3 days, 2 different dinners with him, and it was a hoot. The punchline, though, was he said to me, you're doing pretty good at this. He's back. You can't see him.
You're talking about the acting. You're doing pretty good at
that. You're doing pretty good at this acting thing. He said, I don't have a speaking line. He says, would you be comfortable trying a speaking line? I said, sure. So he gives me a couple lines. I do them at a dinner that night. He said, thank God. He said, we're keeping that in. Thank God you're not a member of the Screen Actors Guild because that would have cost me $35,000. Gary, I am a member of the Screen Actors Guild.
Oh, wow. So wait. Explain this, because how did you get your card?
Because I do a lot of our commercials, and I started doing other people's commercials. So once I started doing other people's commercials, AT&T, JP Morgan and stuff, and I joined had me join the Screen Actors Guild.
Card-carrying guild member.
I still get my royalty checks. I love the term royalty. Last month's was $8.91, so I'm living large.
But how did he have the thought to call you?
Well, because I appeared in the commercials for flowers, so I was sort of ubiquitous as a florist.
Got the idea. Okay.
And he says, I see you all the time. Why don't you do this? It was a hoot. I still have my chair that he had made up for me with my name on the back.
Oh, that's fantastic.
He was a wonderful guy. He asked me then to do another one called Mother's Day, which he did a couple of years later. Unfortunately, schedule-wise, it didn't work out. But he was such a delightful guy. I was just pinched me a few days to see how your industry works.
Well, I'm not really in the film industry, but I did do one film.
You do a lot of videos.
I did a couple of films, actually. One was the biopic of James Brown called Get On Up.
Is that right?
And I played one of his early band members that he hated. And so, of course, I was not in the film for very long. But I got to act opposite the late, great Chad Boseman. And he was fantastic as James Brown.
I would imagine. I didn't see the movie.
And it's a great film. It tells the story, I think, in a respectful way for James. but it was my
What a pioneer.
my first time. Yeah. And so I think about like, I don't know if it's a full circle moment, but James Brown is sort of the foundation of hip hop music. A lot of the early samples of hip hop were using James Brown.
Mhm.
And the way that I performed on stage for the very first part of my career mimicked his energy and his enthusiasm. And so I've sort of toned down since then because I started getting into my singer-songwriter phase, but I used a lot of that energy in my early concerts and performances.
So being in that film was part of your research.
In a way it was.
Did you learn a lot more about him?
I learned so much more about him. I mean, he had a tough upbringing. He was not the kind of, simple, cushy family life. There's a lot of abuse and trauma that contributed to who he was and what made him such a complicated man, but also such a brilliant artist processing all that trauma.
So you're a Renaissance kind of guy. You love science, you love history, you love music, you love composing. What else do you like to spend time on that we might not know about?
Oh man,
having an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old is so
I was about to say, fatherhood is the balance of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to engage and interest my kids in all the things that I do, so that I'm not away from them, just kind of enjoying my own ruminations.
Is one more curious than the other?
I think they have their own curiosities. My son is very curious. He comes up with the most brilliant questions and synthesizes concepts and ideas really quickly. My daughter, the same. She's quite bright, but she's a deep empath. And her empathic and EQ, her emotional intelligence, is far beyond what I had at her age.
Mm.
And
she's the 8-year-old?
She's 11, and my son is 8.
Yep.
Soon to be 9. They're both quick. They're quick-witted and sharp kids.
Yeah.
I told them what I was working on with in biotech and COVID, and I showed them the concept of how medicines are developed, what they do, how they work, and why this kind of work is necessary. And so it helps them think through when I'm telling them, this is why we wash our hands, but not just only wash our hands. This is why we were wearing masks. Mm-hmm. And this is why it's important to take your vitamins, because the vitamins are counteracting and interacting with your biophysiology to either enhance your immune system or to block, pathogens. And they get it. And
it's so interesting because this calendar year has been a year that I've made it a point to try and learn a lot more about diet and its relationship to our health. And there's a dozen different doctors I've come to read about, watch a lot of their videos, and it's changed how I think about a lot of things. And I have 3 grown children. They each have children. I have 7 grandchildren, 2, 2, and 3. And this August timeframe, I'm out to lunch with my middle child, my oldest son. His name is James, and his son, Kurt. And Kurt's being fidgety. I want something to drink, Daddy, and he orders him a Sprite. And I had a reaction. The amount of sugar intake. So we were chatting earlier about how difficult it is for you young parents to manage their kids' screen time. And it's become more and more and more of an issue. But all the forces working against them eating properly and having the right balance starts with awareness and knowledge. It seems like you got to jump on that because they are interested and they will listen to you about our biochemistries. And the last 6 to 12 months are hearing a lot about our gut health. And I think we're going to hear a lot more about that. A lady I was telling you about that I met recently and interviewed for our podcast is a professor up at MIT, and she's all about the chemistry, the electrophysiology, the biology of our bodies. She's a big researcher on using ultrasound for imaging. I told you she invented a bra that women can wear, and it'll do an ultrasound of their breasts, very complete and very detailed. very inexpensively, very comfortably. And a lot can happen between that year or two gap between your mammograms, which are uncomfortable and very expensive and not always accurate because of the mechanics of it. But how do you have those conversations with your kids? Do you have those, or you just try and evidence a lifestyle, have casual conversation? You're in the lab there with those kids.
It's really about evidencing the lifestyle. You show it and try not to demand it. I think I pushed a little bit too hard at a certain point with trying to limit their sugar, and they call me the sugar police in the house. And I'm happy to let them have their fun. I think that I've made my point such that it will ring in their heads every time that they're super conscious of it now. Mm-hmm. And, the research that I'm hearing now and that I've been telling them is, you can have your sugar, just depends on the order. You start with your fiber, your leafy greens, and go to your proteins, and then have your sugar to reduce the sugar spike so that your pancreas isn't fighting so hard to break down sugar by producing insulin. Yeah.
So screen time?
Screen time is one of those things that we were lucky enough we have great friends from Berlin who told us about this pedagogy called Waldorf, the school system. Sure. We found a Waldorf near us, and we entered the kids into this school system, and their entire program is media free. So we have this community of other classmates and families that are on board with us with a media free household. Mm-hmm. And so they just have not been on screens as a way to babysit them. They get their couple of hours on Saturday morning, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. They have their little shows that they enjoy, and then sometimes we'll watch a movie, but it's probably a movie that's already 20 years old or something.
What do you think? What age is appropriate when they get their own phones?
That's literally a conversation we just had. My wife is saying 14 is for the first phone, but a dumb phone, not a smartphone. And I don't know. Australia has mandated this
just recently.
This concept of 16 years old being
social media
the age limit for when they can start on social media. Now, I don't know how they're going to enforce it, but at least they've made the recommendation. Mm-hmm. Our Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, very thoughtful individual, has issued a warning on social media as a health detriment, so a mental health detriment. So, we've got plenty of help from the leadership in both countries that are helping to show other parents and guide us.
You mentioned Surgeon General McMurthy. He's also been very outspoken about the epidemic of loneliness in this country.
Yeah. He wrote a book called Together, and I read the book. I had a chance to meet him and spend some time. And
sounds like you were pretty impressed.
I'm super impressed with him. I met him the first time when he was in Obama's administration, and it wasn't until this his tenure with Biden that I was able to become a friend of his and communicate on a regular basis. But I'm all about championing the cause around how do we increase people's connection, like deep connection, not just an emoji here or there, but in ways where we are standing up for one another and being a safety net for those who are the most vulnerable, who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and loneliness, sadness. And, I want to use my music, hopefully, to create anthems that become mantras for togetherness, for connectivity, for positive social transformation.
How do you think about relationships? You're a young man, you're in the thick of parenting. That changes your social contacts. Oftentimes now your social contacts are going to be career. You have a couple of those. And they're going to be around your children's activities and the other parents around those activities. And then when your kids age out of those programs, your life changes again. Are you conscious of trying to maintain adult male relationships? You mentioned a buddy of yours in Berlin. You mentioned your 3-year roommate at USC is now a law professor at Rutgers, and he's your best friend all these years, and you've stayed connected. How do you think about that? Do you think about that?
I absolutely think about it, because I've recognized that as men age, they tend to err on the side of loneliness more than connection and togetherness.
Well, especially think of your dad.
My dad,
strong role model, independent. They're trained. They're conditioned to be independent. They work as a team. But if everyone around them goes down, they still function. So there's a certain ethos that comes from that, I would think, that's seeped into your upbringing. But my
dad was a big. He had a big family. He had 13 brothers and sisters.
Woo.
So connection. You couldn't but be connected.
Yeah.
And he passed recently in August.
Oh, sorry.
We did his service at Arlington National Cemetery, full honors. It's exactly how you see it in the films. And it was a beautiful service to honor him. And all of these family members and friends came. And you could see this center of an entire wheel with multiple spokes that just branch out to so many different parts of the world. And
so mix of emotions. You're obviously feeling pain.
Oh my goodness.
But pride too.
There's, it's so complicated because my dad had a system of connection to be engaged with everyone. And he was using social media to send messages to everyone. And sometimes it was memes, and sometimes it was videos.
That connectivity.
But he was sending them to, he has a net, they say our network is probably about 200 people. He was literally in communication with those 200 people all week long. And when he passed, we started comparing notes. Well, what messages did he send you? What messages? I thought he was sending everybody the same things all the time. And it was so curated, so specific to the individual. I thought to myself, he must have just been spending his days. And then he had this system of, his mom was a cleaner, had cleaned houses. His dad was a bartender.
In Panama?
In Panama. So we're talking, poverty. He had this practice. It was the first person I recognized, like, tipping. We were in a hotel when I was really young. And when we were leaving the hotel room, bags in hand, about to check out, and he threw a $20 bill on the bed. And I was like, I picked it up and I was like, don't you just drop this money here? I was like, he said, leave it there. And I could not understand for the life of me, why would you leave money on the bed? I was so young that I didn't have the concept of who's coming in next.
You've never forgotten it.
I never forgot it. Beautiful moment for me to learn about.
$20 was a fortune.
He did it because of his mom. Mm-hmm. And so when he passed, we found out that he had this network of cleaners on an almost daily basis, almost every other day. A different cleaner would come to his house, not necessarily to clean. In a way, he would meet these people out at restaurants or in wherever who needed a hand up. And he would invite them into his home and say, look, you can clean my house and I'll pay you. And then they would tell him their story. I'm going to school. I'm trying to get educated. I want to do cosmetology or nursing. And he would invest in these people. And it's just amazing who he was when he retired as a major, how he showed up for his community in that way. And these things he wouldn't tell us because we'd be like, Dad, you're giving your money away to these people. They're probably using you. But it was his way of honoring his mom, his parents, and his way of staying connected. When he passed of a heart attack.
At what age?
At 73. And in my opinion, way too early.
It is way too early.
But it's the average. He's right in that average zone right now. He was not alone in his house because he had picked up a cleaner and she was there with him.
Mm-hmm.
He almost safeguarded that moment, you know? I wish he was with us. I wish I was with him. But 4 years prior, he had a heart attack. He was alone and he could have died if not, and he could have died alone, I should say, if not for, just the serendipity that he was on a Zoom call with a doctor and he had pains in his chest and the doctor said, call 911. And the paramedics came and rescued him. He said he saw the light. He heard the voice. He was floating up above his body. The paramedic said, we shocked you. You had no pulse. And he came back. And so I got 4 more years with him. And so he knew that he knew the fragility of life.
Yeah.
And he knew that in the absence of family around him on a daily basis, he needed to create a new network. He did that connection, that connectivity. And that's the thing, when I was reading Dr. Vivek Murthy's book, I was like, how can we use technology in a way to be our safety net?
And I find that in my life, I have a few different text message groups.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a joke. It could be something interesting, a story in the paper. But I'll give you, for instance, I told you the family has a beach house on the eastern end of Long Island. And it's a group of buddies I get together with in the summertime. We play golf. But normally we wouldn't see one another, say, from Labor Day until the next Memorial Day, which is a long time. And it would be like you'd have to reinvent the relationships. But in the last few years, we stay connected all year round because we're sharing stuff. And someone has something happen, they send out a text about it, we're all commenting and all. And it just makes you feel a little more connected. So when we reconvene in the summertime, we pick right up where we left off because we've stayed connected. So I think having that technology as an assist is important. And, you get to be my age. I'm 73, same age your dad was. And I'm very conscious of the fact that my wife and I have to be deliberate about maintaining our relationships because we have friends who say, oh, we're going to retire to Florida. We're not retired. We have a place in Florida, but we're not retired. And so I said, we have to manage our network here. We have to make sure we're introducing younger people here because you see how loneliness can really creep in, especially for people who are older, aren't working anymore. So you lose that social connectivity. And so it's something we talk about, write about, and think about a lot, about the importance of staying involved, staying connected. A lady who I talk about a lot, I interviewed her a year ago. Her name is Cynthia Covey Haller. Her father was Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and she wrote it with him. And they were working on something together when he passed, and she finished the book, and it meant a lot to me. And because of your musical skills, I'm drawn to tell you about it. So she wrote a book it was a finishing of the work that she started with her father, and it was about him and how he was living. And he was, as he got older, was all out. He was still going all out. And the point was, he said, look, I've lived long enough. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of things. I've made a lot of mistakes. I know how to get things done. And I could live my life one of 2 ways. Musically, I could live it in diminuendo, dun, 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 dun. Or I can live my life in crescendo until the very end. Da, 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 da. Mm-hmm. And that's the title of her book, Living Life in Crescendo. And it was so impactful to me to read that book a year and a half, 2 years ago, and to get to know her and to get to hear the thinking behind it and his work the two of them did on that's become my rallying cry now. My wife and I are living our lives in crescendo. We have 7 grandkids, 3 healthy kids, 3 great in-laws, and we know a lot. We've done a lot. And we're gonna live large, not large, but hard.
That's the way to do it. That's absolutely the way to do it. You're 73. How many kids do you have?
3 kids, 7 grandkids. And if I'd known how good the grandkids would be, I would have been nicer to the kids. And they're all right nearby.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So what's next in your
Oh my goodness. Well, the Crescendo is, I'm still going to be working on the biotech, building this company with
Major Inc.
Major Inc., building this company to advance cancer treatments, advance dysregulated immune treatments, infectious disease potentially if investors turn the corner, but also just creating music. This album that I've just created is called Stand Together, and all of the songs are in service of nonprofit organizations. They're like mini anthems, sonic legacies for each social mission or philanthropic organization. And I think that this is an opportunity to show my peers how they could show up as artists. It doesn't have to be a full album like I'm doing, maybe one song, but certainly there's
just involvement.
There's a cause that you care about,
yeah,
and you can
and you may not know what it is, but go
explore,
explore.
And you know what? Let me help you. I'm here. I'm connected with a lot of organizations, and I can help you divine what it is your true north,
the right connective,
what fits. So, that's for me. That's part of my Crescendo is continuing to call more people in. How can we be actively engaged in service? We have such charmed lives. Let's be as helpful as we can to the most vulnerable, and do that in a sustainable way, and just continue to shed light, create joy.
You still fantasize about things you haven't done that you'd like to do? Is
Oh my
fantasy a part
goodness.
of your mindset?
I do have fantasies about getting involved on the energy industry. My dad, when he was working as a Marine, worked with the Navy quite often and was on ships that were nuclear powered. And I said, Dad, aren't you afraid? He's like, no, the nuclear is quite safe. And it got me thinking about energy shortages and how we can potentially transform the narrative around nuclear being unsafe.
Well, just in the last 3 or 4 months, nuclear went from a vulgar word being fully embraced because we need so much energy. And you have Meta
in the era
Amazon
of AI
and Microsoft investing. And in 120 days, it went from, I can't even mention it, to, nuclear, it's the new day.
Yeah. Didn't Microsoft buy 3 Mile Island or something like that? So yeah, I mean, the voracious appetite of our technological consumption requires high amounts of energy. And I think we just have to be smart about how we're doing it. Fossil fuels is not going to cut it. It's not enough.
No.
We need something else. And until we really figure out fusion is the way to go, potentially, hopefully.
Yeah, I think you're right. All fronts. You need 1,000 shots on goal.
Yeah, it's just like in biotech. We're not the only kid on the block making cancer treatments, but all of them are necessary. They all have different price points and different targets, and they will be useful to someone in some capacity.
And let's talk more about prevention. How do we change our lifestyles so we're not? Look, I'm on the board of a terrific healthcare system here in New York, NYU Langone Health. And we just had a board meeting several weeks ago, and I'm just blown away by these docs and how they devote their lives, and they do so much. I told you about Dr. John up at MIT that I spoke with earlier today, who I'm a huge fan of. But all these people are fixing us. What do we do to not be broken? And how do we make that part of the dialogue? Let's talk about loneliness. Let's talk about appropriate uses of social media. Let's talk about the inputs.
I think it has to do with the messaging, and I want to be part of that messaging, using music as a modality to get the word out.
You have the attention. So
we have.
What do you showcase with those eyeballs and those ears on you?
We have so much capacity. We, the artists community, so much capacity to transform hearts and minds. We open people up with rhythm. We deliver message with word.
And you change how they feel.
We change how they feel, and we change how they act. Music in middle school is a huge determinant of self-identity.
Yeah.
It ends up being, you kind of pick your friends and the way that you interact on campus based on what music you listen to, and it helps identify you. And for better or for worse, in some cases, my goal is to offer, a palette of songs that help grow people up, that are gourmet food with healthy ideas and messages. Because there's plenty of the darkness and
about
the negative.
Their choices, about their practices, their behaviors, and their options.
Absolutely.
And your industry has been radically transformed by one superstar in Taylor Swift. I have a couple of three teenage or almost teenage grandkids, granddaughters, and the commercial change she's brought to your industry. Just finished the Eras tour, grossing $2 billion. I think it's quite a bit more. My daughter took my granddaughter for her birthday to a concert with her sister and a couple of friends, and waited 2.5 hours on the merch line.
Yeah.
No manager, no agent, all done by mom and dad. Extraordinary.
It is extraordinary.
How do you think that impact on your industry ripples through the rest of it?
For me, it's bittersweet because this much attention on one individual means that there's a lot of other messages and a lot of other ideas that are being missed.
But on the other hand, the concert attendance is way up for everybody.
And I think that's because as we're coming out of COVID, concert attendance certainly is going to go up. People want real life experiences. and activities.
And to come together. And as you say, music tells
this
you how
is the
to
opportunity.
Feel. You get to identify who you ask to what concert. Let's go together. It says something about your common interests.
Well, the common interest, but think about it, at any given concert, the breadth of the demographics. Like you've got so many different kinds of age groups, nationalities, religions, all shoulder to shoulder. And in some cases, singing in harmony. It's sort of a nice a picture of what society could be, that concert. But you want the leader who's on stage singing a message that is going to be helpful to those folks,
How do you feel when you finish on stage?
I'm fulfilled.
You get very emotionally connected to your audience.
I'm fulfilled. I get, for me, it may be.
Is it a big rush when you're done? And you've had the impact you wanted to? The endorphins get released?
The endorphins certainly get released. I end up leaving the stage and going to meet with the audience because I want folks to recognize that although I was on a pedestal, I'm really just like them, and I want them to feel how approachable I am in that way. A lot of artists don't do that. A lot of artists disappear and they just kind of remain that mystery. And
that's certainly not the message of your music.
No,
it's all about
no.
connectivity and relationships
really
and the importance you're placing those. You're going to have a career as long as you want it. I hope it does great things for you. I said when I first met you, I went home, I said to my wife, I met this extraordinary guy. I said, just extraordinary in so many ways. And now getting to spend more time with you, it's ever more the feeling I have. You are an extraordinary guy. And I'm so glad that we've had a chance to meet and get to talk today. And I get to share my enthusiasm for you and the things you do with our community. So thanks for being so generous.
I find you quite extraordinary as well. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I appreciate
my pleasure.
you.
So a new song is out today. You did Good Morning America.
Yeah. The song is called Don't Go Alone. It's based on an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so this is my opportunity to be part of the togetherness and connectivity movement.
Thanks for your leadership on that, because it's extremely important, and your message is a powerful one. Thanks.
Thank you.